All right. Good Mountain Monday morning to you, and we welcome you to the Mountain Monday Morning Show right here on Mountain Fun Life Channel. We appreciate all of you who follow the program, and we hope we can give you something that is beneficial to you, or at least that is interesting about the mountains here. And have an interesting topic this morning about how some of the land grants were done in this area, and how a lot of it came about. I hope I can get all my points in, and some of them may be controversial, but anyway, we some of it's kind of vague, even historically, and there's not really any set way of pinning down the preciseness of some of it, but we'll do our best to give you what we have found on it. And I'm Robert Ownby, your host, along with Mountain Man Wayne McCarter, and we're just so glad that you could join us. If you have, if you've not, why then join us. Shake them, wake them up. What do they need to do?
They need to tweet.
Need to tweet, text, get on the phone, click, share.
Live.
Be sure to click and share. We want you to do that because that keeps the ball rolling, to use a worn-out cliche, keep it all going. And so we enjoy coming in here and doing what we can. We try to keep it informative, a little bit entertaining, and just share our mountain heritage with you, and hope that you all enjoy it. We got folks watching all the way around the world, I'm telling you. The cooking shows, man alive, are they ever gaining traction. People are loving those cooking shows. Your beans and cornbread, and we got people commenting from around the world and across the United States, and I'm kind of surprised at how much interest that people are taking over just simple mountain things, simple mountain food. We got some good ones coming up a little bit later on, so you keep following those cooking shows. But right now, we are going to go to our intro, and then we're going to get back with you and dig in. Welcome back to Mountain Monday Morning, and we hope that you have texted and tweeted and done all that good stuff, and be sure and click and share, and that just helps keep us rolling here. And we want to talk to you a little bit this morning. We've had a lot of good discussions here lately about mountain heritage, and my new book, The Historic Ogle Family of the Smoky Mountain Heritage, is really... I'm telling you, people taking a lot of interest in it, and I keep finding out little bits and pieces of the family heritage that I had wondered about, and just didn't really know exactly how a lot of things came about. You know, you take things for granted, and it involves a lot of times it involves the political structure, and we are not very political people. We don't like too much politicking can be, well, just overdone too much. But anyway, there's some things that happen that do involve the politics of the Continental Congress, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and some things that transpired that kind of moved or motivated the settlers into the colonies and eventually across the mountain over here into East Tennessee from the Carolinas and Georgia, Virginia. And that involved a lot that has to do with the political structure of the time. Now, I have to, as much as I don't want to mention political things, I have to bring some out in order to explain this. But when you studied American history, as we studied it, we learned about the Revolutionary War, the 13 colonies, and the Continental Congress of the United States. This was before there was a Constitution, and we had a lot of things going on. The soldiers that fought in that war, they wound up after the Revolution was fought and won. They weren't getting paid what they were promised to get. They weren't getting their money. So some things transpired that followed and motivated the settlers that came to the Carolinas on down to the southern states in general, coastal states, then across the Great Smoky Mountains into what we now have as East Tennessee. Of course, we've got the Great Smoky Mountains here, which became the national park later. But these and I had relatives on both sides, my mother's side and my dad's side, that from the Ombies and Ogles that were Revolutionary, I guess you call them Revolutionary War heroes that fought in the Revolutionary War. And so some of the soldiers that weren't getting paid, you know, they had a situation that came about, and they got a little upset about it. Now, our Continental, this was before the Constitution. This one, the states still had a little more sovereignty. Well, actually, they had most of the sovereignty. They got to coin their own money. They could even borrow money. Some of them had borrowed money to help fight the Revolutionary War from France, Germany, and so they were kind of taking care of their own affairs, paying their own debts and own bills and everything. And the southern states had basically paid off, almost out of debt after the Revolution. They'd almost paid it off. And some of the other states, more to the north, had not paid. I mean, they were dead broke. Continental Congress was dead broke. They had no way to pay their troops. So their troops got literally up in arms. They took musket in hand and marched on Constitutional Hall in Philadelphia. On the delegates.
Know a little bit about being broke.
You might know a little bit about being broke. Well, I might could relate to that in some ways too. But anyway, these guys had fought to win this Revolutionary War, you know, and they weren't getting paid. And they marched on in Philadelphia. They marched on the Constitution Hall there. Philadelphia Hall, and they said, listen, fellas, now we just fought a war here, and our families need fed, and we need our money. You're going to have to give. You're going to have to do something. So Continental Congress kind of tucked their tails and hightailed it out of town. They went over to New Jersey for a while, and they held Congress meetings over there because, now, these fellas weren't messing around. They wanted paid. And so the Congress, the delegates from the states in the Constitutional Congress of Philadelphia, Philadelphia Hall, they had to move to New Jersey for a while, and they kind of moved up to New York, and they were headquartered in New York for a while, and even in Maryland for a while, trying to hammer out a plan how to get out of this predicament. Though I'm telling you, these soldiers, buddy, were on their tails. And so they were trying to hammer out a plan. How are we going to take care of this? The kind of federal head at that time of the state delegates of the the delegates had been sent from each state that formed Congress at this particular time, they were trying to figure out a way to get out of this, and they were saying, well, what are we going to do? The power structure is basically with the states. The states can coin their own money, and the states that were paying off their indebtedness even to other countries could coin their own money, and each individual state acted as its own sovereign unit, so to speak, or state within a state. And so they were saying, hey, let's get this paid. Let's get out of debt here so we can take care of our own people in our own states. So that's what they were doing. But some of the other states weren't doing that. And they were looking at the states that were getting paid out and said, no, these, but what can we do, because the sovereign states are more sovereign than our central authority here of the constitutional republic. And it kind of loosely knit, states, but they were sovereign states. And so they said, well, let's do this. The Federalists, which were more of the northern states, came up with a plan. They said, okay, we ain't got no money to pay our troops. And these others been about paid out. They ain't going to like it if we kind of gouge them to pay our debt for us. But why don't we come up with a constitution and get them to sign it that gets them to relinquish, now this is what happened, their states' rights to print money, and we'll control it for them. We'll forbid them by the Constitution to print legal tender of any kind, and either to borrow money from other countries. They had done that, but they were paying that off. And they said, let's stop all this, but we have to have more authority given to a centralized federal government. But now to get these states involved, both to the north and to the south, it was some slick planning. They said, well, how are we going to do this? The anti-federalists said, now wait a minute, boys. You don't even have in this Constitution here a Bill of Rights or the individual rights. And the Federalists, who wanted the federal headship to come together to get more authority from the states, they said, well, now your state constitutions give those rights, like the Magna Carta of England, the country that we just fought to get our freedom from. They had rights in the Magna Carta for individuals, and the state of Virginia, the state constitution of Virginia, had personal rights. So I see the point in one sense that the Federalists had. They said, well, that's already guaranteed. But the Anti-Federalist looks back at them and says, well, now, we cannot sign this, because how do we know? Now, listen to what I'm about to say, because this is exactly what has happened. They said, how do we know that you, as a federal head, a governing body over all the states, will not usurp power over the states and infringe on those rights? They said, we ain't signing until you provide a guaranteed Bill of Rights. So they got together and they concocted the Bill of Rights, and they came up with their different, I think they had about 11, 12 of them. They finally agreed on 10. The Anti-Federalists, who are more to the southern states, and the Federalists, who were more of the elite type, aristocratic, they said, well, we'll capitulate on another thing for you if you'll go ahead and sign, because they were still being a little reluctant to sign for the Bill of Rights to be entered, or for the Constitution to be signed, even with the Bill of Rights. So the states more to the north said, we'll centralize a plot of ground in between the area here, kind of a federal property for the federal head, Washington, D.C. And they said, we'll move that more to the south and kind of put it central, so where we can all kind of work and operate together. Okay, so they went ahead and signed on. And by signing on, no state in the Union from that point on could coin money, print money, or do anything about the transactions, state transactions, interstate commerce. That was turned over to the federal head, this new federal government under the Constitution. Now, under the Constitution, the federal headship, they agreed to, will not print money either, because you remember they had printed in the Revolutionary War, they had the Congress, Continental Congress, had printed the Continental bills, which was not worth a Continental because it was not backed by anything. They didn't have anything to back it up. So what they did is they said, well, we'll agree not to print money either, but we're going to forbid you to print money. But there was no stipulation included that says that the federal head could not. There was no restriction on them. It didn't say, well, you can't print either. They said, we'll just agree not to print. We'll leave that to the private sector. But the game plan was Hamilton National Bank, to where the federal head could control the private sector also by, you guessed it, the Federal Reserve. So there we go again. So, but in order, what I'm getting to bring this down to the more local level, which is what we're about, is telling you how it transpired. I had to get into a little of the background history of it. That the troops were given land grants for their service because they had nothing to pay them with. So this is, you take 100 acres, 200 acres here in the Smoky Mountains, the East Tennessee area, and whatever this newly conquered lands that we have here, we're going to give you a land grant in exchange in lieu of what we owe you for your service. So that's how a lot of my ancestors got. Now, there were personal transactions done too. I found actual courthouse records and read those and included them into the genealogy books on both sides, the Ombie and the Ogle side, where 100 acres would be bought and added to the holdings that they had, which would be a personal transaction. But some of the properties were done by land grants because the Continental Congress was broke and couldn't pay the troops. Now, we did have a question. We did have a question on the presidential aspect of Continental Congress versus Constitutional Congress, and I wanted to clarify something concerning that about the presidents of the Continental Congress before it became Constitutional Congress. As we know, George Washington was the first president under the Constitutional Congress, but the Continental Congress had its presidents. Now, this was before, to explain what someone had questioned us about, to explain that some might say that, well, those president or people who presided over Congress, there was no office, an executive office formed at that time, so they weren't presidents. Well, that's kind of splitting hairs, because the ones who were president of Congress at that time, since there was not an executive branch, it was kind of a combined office. He was president of Continental Congress, as well the representatives from the various states, the colonies and states at that time. He was also presiding or president over them. So the reason they want to start with the Constitution is if people look back too far in their historical archives, they will see what transpired that kind of got us in our big national debt today. Wow, I forget how many trillion it is. And they were supposed to, they told the states, you turn your sovereignty over to us and you quit printing money and we'll do all this for you, and we'll have a reserve bank over here, which is really not federal, not a federal bank. It's private owned, but the feds control it. And our national debt is soaring because of a transaction that transpired right here in this particular time, from the constitutional republic from the Continental Congress. Continental Congress, the states had the sovereign power. After the signing of the Constitution, the states relinquished their sovereign power to a certain extent to the constitutional head in Washington, D.C. So Abraham Lincoln was the first president there of the constitutional when the executive branch was formed. But who formed that executive branch? And we spoke on the seal, the presidential seal, and the seal of the United States. And I threw out some names real quick because you can soon run out of time in explaining things. We had a question about that, that President John Hanson, considered actually the first noted president after the signing of the before the Constitution. I'm trying to think of it. Anyway, Articles of Confederation. There, I got it. Slipped my mind. That's one of those moments. I know. Let's have a cup. Let's have a sip of coffee.
Under the Confederacy, the Confederate States.
Well, it was all considered. It was what they did is all of the states had their representatives, and it was called a confederation altogether. Not just. It was all 13 colonies combined. Now, those representatives had a president over them. That was before the office, the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch, 3 branches of government. So the president, before the Constitution, acted as both. He presided over the states as president and over Congress. See, today, now that we have the executive branch, a 3rd branch of government, then the vice president kind of fills that position. He's the one that kind of sits in Congress and does the congressional oversight as a vice president. But this particular time, before the Constitution, the president kind of helped the states get through their problems and situations and help to guide through this constitutional or this confederation of states. So what happened was when they appointed John Hanson, I made the mention of John Hanson, that he was in the oversight of overseeing, actually, he's the first one that was called president. In his own letters, he refers to himself as the president. And I actually read some of those letters, copies of them online on the internet in congressional history. And he referred to himself in those letters as president, plus the others, John Adams, even George Washington was just a representative then. They referred back to him as actually the president. So, but now, the things that he did, he is the one, John Hanson served, they only served 1 year at a time at this particular time. He served from 1781 to 1782. That was President Hanson who presided over Congress as well the states. And he was the one after the Revolutionary War who ordered all foreign troops off of U.S. property. He said, you get out of here. He said, you get out. So he's the one that ordered that. Now, my mention of him in relation to the presidential seal and even the seal of the United States, my intent there to clarify, I was trying to go through these rapidly, and the question, it was a good question, and I'm glad it was brought up because I feel like that needs to be clarified. He personally was overseeing a kind of a group that had been appointed to design a presidential seal as well as a seal of the United States. It doesn't mean that he, with his own hands, although he probably did that too, because they had formed a committee. And this committee consisted of Thomas Jefferson was one, and I think John Adams was another one. And so President Hanson was overseeing this process as they were drawing schematics on what they wanted the seal to look like. So he was probably actually hand drawing, at least overseeing. So my comment that he designed it, he was the overseer of the designing process and probably even helped design it. So the intent of that comment is that he was considered president at this particular time and was over. As a matter of fact, the three branches of government, a lot of things were happening under President John Hanson. He was overseeing not only the expulsion of foreign troops off of U.S. property, he was also overseeing this committee that was formed to say, hey, we need to design a seal, and we need to design the presidential seal, and I don't know what all. There were several things that happened during this time. But to run through these quickly, from 1781-1782, John Hanson was president of Congress. Thomas Mifflin from 1783-1784. Richard Henry Lee, 1784-1785. John Hancock, 1785-1786. Nathaniel Gordon, 1786, 1787. Arthur St. Clair, 1787 to 1788. And this brings us up to the signing of the Constitution, where they ran into the problems between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, where they wanted to switch sovereignty from the states to the sovereignty being under a federal headship. And that's where a lot of changes took place. And so, but both articles, the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution, both called the colonial states the United States of America. So before the setting up of the three branches of government, it was mostly central in under the Articles of Confederation. Those who presided over Congress were in turn considered presidents of the United States. So that's how it all came about. So a reference to the person in charge, as in John Hanson, with all these things going on, he had these committees, and he was overseeing these committees. So he was the one who gave the final okay. And actually, when they came up with their design of how they wanted the seal, the presidential seal, to look, he turned it over to the Secretary of the Federation, the Secretary of the State, to take to, I believe the guy, I don't recall his name, I don't know if it gives his name. He was a postmaster who was good at making seals. So the final product was done by a postmaster. But it's interesting to go back and look and see how our ancestors, what motivated, what were the circumstances that brought them into the properties of the United States. And of course, later, the United States, when they wanted to come up with they gave them the land in exchange, land grants in exchange for their fighting the Revolutionary War. Then, after they got this big federal headship and got more power situated there, they came to the states, North Carolina, Tennessee, and a few other states, as far as getting the lands federalized again to make it a national park. They came to the private landowners and to the states, respective states. Well, let's take Tennessee. They came to the legislature and said, "Hey, we want to make a park here. It's going to be federalized, and so many thousands of acres have got to be given back over to us." Now, these private landowners, I know, we owed them money and we gave them property in exchange for their fighting the Revolutionary War. Of course, this was the relatives. They said, well, if they don't give it up, then we're going to have to come up with something like, it was a condemnation suit. They would condemn it and take it. Of course, they would still reimburse them a certain amount for what they thought the property was worth. But that's how they come back and said, I know we gave you that land because we owed you a certain amount of money, but now we want it back. And so if you don't give it up, then we're going to condemn it and take it. And that's how they kind of like the Trail of Tears they did to the colonies in this area and similar areas. Kind of the same thing. So that's how it all came about. We done gone run out of time. I'm telling you, I love to get into topics like this and kind of follow the trail of how our ancestors came to the Great Smoky Mountains. We thank you for joining us today, and we need to get on out of here. So what do you need to say, Mountain Man? Bye, Mountain Man.
Yeah, but first I want to shout out to my friends and family there in Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania. Follow the program, yes.
So, and after that, we'll say bye.
Thank you, Pennsylvania. Bye.
Thank you.